Okay, so but let's take a look at this one. And yeah, I already gave away that I got to use this version. That's the one that was shipped Sunday night. And Easy Security actually works. If you take the 2013 objects, you can import them right away, and you will actually be able to use them in 2013 R2 in there. If I look at it here, I have several users. I have one down here called Susan, and I can see I assigned some permission. I made Diane like Susan. So let's set up Peter as a new user in here. And somebody just told me, it's like, hey, he's a new guy. Just give him the same permission as John has in the system in here. That's an easy way of setting a new person up. You're just basically saying, I want to be like that person, or somebody tells you that, and then you have basically created that new user in the system. If we go take a look at John, then we can, of course, assign roles as you used to in here. The roles is like the many different levels you have, like posting a sales order, creating a customer, and so on. But we can also do groups in here. So if I go take a look at this one, we have created several groups down here. And one of them down here is called sales. And I can actually see out here that I have the role basic, so I can log in. I have some relationship management. I have some sales receivable roles. It's basically everything the user is needed inside that one role down here. We can create groups of our groups. So if we have set up these lower level people, we can build the one on the higher level simply by saying, oh, the same as that group, plus the extra permission they actually need in the system in here. So, but let's select this sales group down here. The other thing is we have grouped the companies the same way. One of the most, or one of the worst things a customer can have is like having 5 companies in the database, and then the 4th or the 5th company is a consolidation company. So basically, they want people to have access to 4 companies, but not the last one. That means it's like every permission you give has to multiply with 4. But if we create a group like the one we have in here, operations, it's actually a group of 3 companies in here. So when I assign that one, it really only looked like I have one single line in here, sales and operations. But behind the of course, it will be a lot more groups in here, or role and company combinations. So if I update this one, I can see I have 45 access controls. So that's what at one point will be written to the system. And this one is, of course, the part that NAV understands. NAV don't understand groups, it understands roles and companies, and behind the scene all the data is just getting built and getting ready. The other thing we do is summary permissions. And if I take a look at that one, there's certain places in the system you're really interested in knowing what people have for access, not necessarily by each individual role, but as a total permission the user gets. In this case, I can actually see in here that in the vendor ledger entry, this user has only read permission in the Kroner Euro company in here. And that's the kind of information an auditor will look at. They don't care which groups are assigned, they care about the total permission to these few tables in here. And you can set up any table to show up. Right now, we just have the posting tables in here. One of the things we actually took all the data and made it kind of look everywhere against it. So when I do here object where used, I can see I have 115 roles in here where I actually have permissions to my vendor table. I can go look at each individual one and see what the permissions are and so on. So we basically just look everywhere on the same information in here. But let's go back and look at the user, because one thing is also, sometimes you have somebody that goes on vacation and somebody else needs to do the job for that person. So we can actually assign temporary permissions in here. Let me just use super data in here. And I'll do it only in my Kroner Europe company, for example. I can go out and say this permission should actually expire on the 18th of November down here. And that means you give a temporary permission. And whenever that date comes, we will check this field here called no permission. And it basically means that, okay, I'm using a Kroner's company, so I don't like my date. I guess I have to change it to, I'll give the user to 1st of November instead. So that works. But this no permission feature also works great when you're upgrading your security. It basically means it's like you go in and remove all the old ones, and the new ones are active. If it don't work, you just reverse the options and then you're back to where it should be at that point. But this one is really kind of like a nice to have. The real feature in here is about the roles actually. And to create a new role in here, typically you go in and then you put in the customer, you put in another thing, then we go in and test and it don't work. Then you get another test and it don't work and you just add one table at a time actually here. What we do with Easy Security is we use the SQL profiler in here. And I'm just going to start this one, do a new trace. I can actually, when I start the trace, filter on a specific service tier, and in 2009 and earlier, you can filter on specific users also if you want to actually. In 2013, we normally recommend you set up a service tier that is only used for recording, because that means every transaction that goes through that one, that's what you actually want to have. But I'll just run this one, and it just sits here and listens to what goes between the client or the service tier and the database. So if I go back here and say I want to go edit a customer in here, and I will just go select 10,000 down here. And that's all I wanted to do in here. And I'll go here and stop my trace, and then I will save this one as a trace XML file. And this one was the edit customer. Inside NAV, I will create a new role, not a new customer. And instead of adding permissions directly, some tools like user rights tool, for example, would add permission directly in here. We actually add them to a recording in here. And the reason to use a recording instead of the permit directly to the role is we can attach the same recording to multiple places. So if I need to go in and I think it's in here, and have a new customization that breaks a couple of my roles, I make one recording, I attach that role to multiple places in the system. It also means if I made a role that could do too much, and I can actually take that recording away, redo the recording, and maybe leave the rest of them in there actually. So, but this one, it went through and it went and found all the entries. And one of the interesting things about R2, by the way, is the performance of it. This one in a 2013 regular database would actually take around 300 milliseconds instead of 150 milliseconds. The performance seems to be much, much better in R2 than what it was in 13, by the way. Nothing to do with our software, by the way, but just a nice fact. So, but I have all the transactions. I know by company, by database, so I can actually pick which one I want to include, and I'll just take all of them because there was only me working in here. I had 103 permissions actually inserted for that one process in here. If I go take a look, I know, of course, that I could read and modify my customer and all the other permissions that were required. Another thing was captured was all the objects that executed in here. And I mentioned earlier that we can limit what objects people can execute by denying certain ones. The only way you need to actually give them is simply to do a recording, because it will know which objects is needed for that process also. So you can easily take that away from people. But we have this recording. I'm going to add it to my role in here, and then I'm going to use my update role function. This one is using the second part of Easy Security. I have 103 permissions recorded. I now have 116 or 160 permissions in here. And everything that is additional is the one that the system actually calculated for me. I needed to modify my customer. And to modify my customer, I need some time to look up to payment terms, to look up to currencies, to look up to all these places in the system. This one is based on a source code analysis of the actual customer's code. So when we implement this one, we run the source code analysis, it will know all these table relations, flow fields, and other things we're using in here. Another thing we do is we actually improve the role down here. So we can see that I have recorded pages, but I also have additional pages. This one is fact boxes. That's, yeah, I didn't use it on my screen, but another user could actually have decided to put those fact boxes on their screen at that point. So, but this role, as one of our customers said, it's like it used to take 2 hours to make a role, and it never worked when you deployed it anyway. And then with Easy Security, it takes 5 minutes, and 90 to 95% of the times it's right the first time. Plus, it's so easy that I don't need to know that the customer table is 18. I don't need the sales head is 36 and those ones. The tool will figure that out. So we train customers, and the customer will actually maintain their own security. So there's no reason that you fight over a bill who is paying for a bug in the error or in the security. So that's really one side of it. I have now created this one. What I want to do is go to my sales role group in here and create a new line and use my edit customer role in here. And then I will go do a publish, and the publish process is where we actually changing the permissions in the live system. Until this point, I didn't need any permissions for the security. I only needed security inside this company and nothing else. Now I need to be a super user that has permission to change everybody else's permission. So you can have IT people that work, do all this configuration. Somebody goes in, review it, and actually push the button and change the real security. We can even have an application server that runs, and the application server will actually pick up the task and do the publish of the permissions. And this one runs very fast. But before I actually do anything in here, I will create a restore point. It basically means I take a snapshot of the current permissions, and I will then write the new ones on top of it in here. Again, this one is probably 2-3 times faster in R2 than what it was in 2013, but on exactly the same hardware. It's pretty impressive how fast it is in here. So, but I have published my permissions, and that basically means I have now the new permissions inside my live system, and the users will be able to use them. If I go look at the restore points out here, that's the kind of information we capture, and I can always do a manual one in here. So I'll just do a manual restore point and take the current permission from live. Even if I did something manually, I can always go in and just take a snapshot of those ones also in here. So I have 44,000 records using to control my security, and I have 500 less up here. That is my previous one. I can do a compare and go in and say I want to look at my data in an indented way. I want to compare information, both about my users, their access, and the roles, and then go down and say I want to compare this one against my second last one down here. And this one now builds a screen it is pretty technical, I will admit that one. But it is nice to be able to see that in here I have lines that comes from my old restore point, that is number 12, line that comes from a new one. And I can basically just jump through in here and I can see my user, Susan, got the edit customer in the Kronos Europe companies and the other 3 companies. I have my user, John, down here that got a whole bunch of new permissions. My user, Diana, also got some permissions. And I had Peter. And then I had my new role. And then as I click next, I have no more changes. So you have auditors that has been through your whole system, everything is certified. They come back 3 months later and want to redo it. If you can print this kind of information to them, it's going to be a lot less hours that they actually need to verify your system. They can spot check something, but they don't have to do a complete review of all of it. This compare feature, by the way, is handled in Easy Security. If you have 2 products and you want to know what the difference are, you can basically record 2 traces and just compare those 2 traces at the same way. Yeah. The last thing is the object level security, and I'm just going to show you one screen in here. It basically means that I can go in here and go to the end. And I have a bunch of pages in here that has been marked as object level security in here. And the system in Easy Security actually maintains one role for you. The role up here is called, click in the window to go there. all three, and I can see that's close to 3,000 permissions in here. So that's all the objects I don't have people run. And every time you add a new object, you publish, this role will be updated with each object I don't deny people access to. So actually, everybody could do object level security by deleting page 0, but it would be a maintenance nightmare to maintain security after that one. Now you just deny access, and the system will deal with the rest of it.